This is Sarah Vassallo. I don't know, I can't see myself, but I hope you can see me. Anyway, you can hear me. I am the adult programming librarian at Park Ridge Public Library, your home library. Thank you for joining Emma and me tonight. While I have you, I do want to mention quickly, since you're health conscious people, some other programs that might be interesting to you. We have a chair yoga every Wednesday at 2 p.m. and we have a huge following and it's wonderful. Please come to chair yoga. Also, not health conscious, but your own well-being. We have job searching in the times of COVID-19. That's on the 19th. And then just for fun and further learning, we have a trivia night, we have book discussions, concerts, all kinds of stuff still going on. So go to our website and sign up to join us again, please. But tonight, Emma Mulvaney, whose face you might recognize, the founder of EM Holistic Wellness, is a holistic nutritionist, health coach, and personal fitness trainer. She follows the whole food, plant-based movement, and she believes that abundant health is your birthright. She is also a daughter of Park Ridge and part of the library family. Tonight, she's here to give us a beginner's guide to plant-based nutrition and how this and other practices helps with our overall health. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I'm just going to minimize the videos here just so I don't get distracted. All right, well, as the title, A Beginner's Guide to Plant-Based Nutrition and Holistic Health suggests, we'll be focusing very much on the basics of plant-based nutrition tonight. So this is perfect for those who are new to the whole food plant-based movement, or you're just curious about what a more plant-centered way of eating looks like. If you're not new to this lifestyle, though, hopefully this can still serve as either a refresher for you, hopefully you receive some new information, and really I just hope it's inspirational for everybody. So let's put these slides. All right, hopefully you're seeing my screen, my slides. Excuse me. So before we begin, as I said in the chat, just take a moment to tell me why you're here. I'll be checking in to just kind of see what people's goals are, what you're hoping to get out of tonight. There will be time for Q&A at the end, but you don't have to save your questions. You can hop into the chat. Sarah can feed me questions a couple times throughout our talk tonight, so that we can kind of get to everything that everyone wants to learn. Also jot down this link. It's at my website. It's emholisticwellness.com/PRPL. Because this is where I have some additional handouts that weren't sent out beforehand. I also have some recipes, and then the slides from tonight will be there as well. So write that down, but it's also on the first page of your handout, and it will be on the last slide as well. Just looking at the chat here for a second. Very nice. All right, so just to frame our discussion tonight, we'll actually start with an overview of holistic nutrition and what a holistic approach can bring to really any health goal. And then I'm going to share just a little bit about my own experience with my health challenges, just to provide an example of how impactful a holistic approach can be, as well as how I came to be so passionate about a plant-based lifestyle. This is very much a personal mission for me, which I think you'll feel kind of as we get through this. Just 1 second, let's take a sip here. And then we're going to talk about some of the benefits of plant-based nutrition and how this way of eating is really the future of nutrition and health. Now, most of you have come here because you have an interest already, or you may have already started a bit on this journey. So we're not going to spend a ton of time in the benefits and the science of it. I'd like to spend as much time as possible really in the strategies and the implementation. So if you have questions about the science and kind of the why of some of this, I really invite your questions to my email as well, because I love talking nutrition and I will talk about it with anybody and everybody. So if there's stuff we don't hit on today, please feel free to reach out. When we get to the basics of plant-based nutrition, this is really where your handouts are going to come in. So if you have those handy from Sarah, you might want to have them pulled up. And then finally, we'll wrap up by talking about how you can weave together a holistic approach with plant-based nutrition. So for a more sustainable lifestyle and health plan that you can create that's really unique for you. So that's where we're headed today. So let's get into. All right, so let's get into holistic health. So no matter how familiar you are with the term or not familiar with the term, you likely know more than you think you do about a holistic approach. So in its most simple terms, a holistic approach considers the whole body, the whole person, in the context of their whole life. So it's super simple. And in the context of holistic nutrition, there are just a couple more parts that we like to consider. So the first is the understanding that our bodies are comprised of interconnecting systems that, given an ideal environment, they really work harmoniously to keep us healthy and vibrant. So health really is our body's default state if we let them do their thing. And it's when we detour from this ideal that disease occurs. And I don't just mean disease like heart disease and diabetes, but also just dis-ease, not feeling our best, not feeling well. And so viewing the body as a whole also means seeing that a symptom or disease is rarely caused by just one factor. There are usually multiple reasons why we may not be feeling our best. And with holistic approach, you can start teasing out really like what some of those factors are that are keeping you from feeling good. And the second part here is that health, and by health I mean physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, every aspect of health really doesn't happen in isolation. So a holistic approach to nutrition really supports you with a process that unpacks your home environment, your daily routine, your support network, stressors, work life, family life, hobbies, activities, just any factor that's going to impact your ability to be well. So this is really what we mean by a mind, body, soul approach. We're really taking care of the entire person and not just one symptom or one issue, even in the context of nutrition. And one size does not fit all is really the backbone of my approach and that of a holistic process, because every body and every person is so unique with a unique set of circumstances that an individualized approach is going to be necessary for everyone to succeed. So we have this wheel illustration here on the left that shows the 7 key areas that holistic practitioners assess in order to identify challenges and obstacles to your total wellness. And then around those challenges and obstacles, we create a plan and practices to help elevate those areas of your life. Now, today we're mostly talking about the physical and a little bit of the emotional, but I just wanted you to see with this wheel how encompassing a holistic approach really is. Because even as a holistic nutritionist, we could touch all of these areas if we need to, just whatever is impacting your ability to be well. Now, my favorite part of a holistic approach and why I gravitated toward it for my own personal goals is the fact that it's a new way of thinking. It's actually an incredibly ancient way of thinking, but a new way in terms of our current culture. Just a new way of thinking about your well-being that is very much in contrast to what is taught in our mainstream culture, especially in regards to health and wellness. Because we're at a point where we've been conditioned to look outside ourselves for the solutions, for the programs, just for the answers to what ails us, when really the answers lie within. And so I think a holistic approach is effective for many reasons, but one of the primary reasons is that it puts you back in the driver's seat of your health. Holistic practitioners know that you are the expert. Our bodies are wise, our bodies are unique, and our bodies are sending us messages all the time, letting us know what's working, what's not. And I think collectively, we're at a point where we've just lost touch with that connection. As we engage in some of the practices and tools that are part of the holistic process, and coincidentally, plant-based eating complements this really well, we can reclaim that connection. So it becomes a more sustainable approach that really allows you to be flexible, and it equips you to adapt your plans to your circumstances as priorities change. And that's primarily by reestablishing you as the expert of your own body and health. The practitioner is not the expert, the doctor is not the expert, you are. They just have the tools to help you tap into that ability. And this mindset of adaptability also really opens you up to solutions and different ways of accomplishing your goals that you may not have seen if you were following a strict diet or program or regimen. So you can adjust your practices and strategies without losing progress and without feeling guilty or having that feeling of like falling off the wagon. That can feel really defeating because it's a very positive approach. It's really rooted in kindness and nourishment and nourishing. And we know that when we approach our goals with flexibility and kindness to ourselves, we're more likely to stick with our plans and we feel more connected to our goals, which really leads to more long-term success. And a holistic approach can really be for everybody because it's extremely individualized and intuitive, and it's based on your unique needs and lifestyle, and the process is guided by you. You're led and given some tools and some strategies by a practitioner, but you're really leading the process. And so now that we're all on the same page, I just want to pause a moment here, Sarah, and see if we have any questions that we should get to before I share a bit about my own experience.
I don't see any questions after all of our lovely comments about what brought people here, but not quite yet. I'll let you know.
Just move on then to, okay, so please don't tweak your neck trying to read the slide. I'll be talking about each of the points. So as far back as I can remember, I had body image issues. I was self-conscious of my weight, also what my body was able to do. I struggled in PE class. I compared my body to my peers, even as far back as first and second grade that I can remember. And of course, it just kept escalating through middle school and high school, as it does with a lot of girls. But then I was diagnosed with depression when I was 18, and I was prescribed antidepressants basically right off the bat. And I spent the next almost 8 years cycling through different medications, looking for ones that worked for me, but with very little success. So I would feel good for maybe 3 to 6 months, and then the effects would taper off. And during this time, my weight continued to yo-yo and to climb, but I still continued to have an interest in physical fitness and nutrition. And actually, it was during this time that I obtained my personal trainer certification, hoping that it would provide me with the education and the motivation to finally address my weight, which, spoiler alert, the education wasn't enough. It wasn't going to solve all my problems. But it was also during this period that I struggled with a lot of seemingly unrelated and kind of just random physical ailments. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which never felt like it fit. I had my thyroid checked multiple times, looking for causes for lagging energy. I had rashes. I had migraines. I just had a lot of small but like inconvenient and frustrating symptoms. And I was just at the point where I never felt good, ever. And so finally in 2015, I was about 25 and I just had enough. I was planning a wedding. I was planning my future. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm in my mid-20s. What does my future hold if this is me at 25? And so just by sheer fate, I was exposed to a holistic approach to wellness via a psychologist that was also a registered dietitian. And so having a psychology degree myself and an interest in nutrition, we hit it off right away. And I am still so grateful to this doctor because she was the first to help me see that my struggles with my mental health were very much related to my physical health. And again, I mean, everything's connected. There's a ton of interplay there. And then she also helped me to see that where I thought my weight was the source of my unhappiness and wherefore, and then my thinking that like losing weight was going to lead me to be happy. She helped me discover that focusing on my overall health, focusing on my body issues, identifying and healing my gut issues, and then nourishing myself, not only with nourishing food, but also with activities that I love and just more joy in my life, really prioritizing that made all the difference to my happiness and then to my overall health. And so I continued to work with her for 2 years. And then I got pregnant with my daughter, my first, and I made the decision to stop my medication That was just a personal choice that was right for me. And I then dedicated my pregnancy to finding ways to continue to truly nurture myself and take care of myself without medication. And during my pregnancy, it was really, I dedicated like a full-time job at that point to find out what makes me happy and what is going to help me be healthy. And so in that process, I found out that really my case of depression was more a mismatch between what I needed and my environment. And by environment, I mean a diet that supports my gut. And 70% of neurotransmitters are produced there. So that was a big part of healing my mental health as well. Getting more activity to release endorphins and to make me feel capable and strong. And also just looking at how I functioned in my life, the way my work life was structured, the job I was doing at the time that was deeply unfulfilling, where I prioritized my time and energy, what I allowed in my life, and what my inner dialogue was like. And so now having two girls, it made me realize very quickly that I didn't want them to inherit my self-image issues. And I didn't want them to tie their self-worth to their weight. And more than anything is I wanted to have the energy and the tools to model an active and healthy lifestyle. I didn't want to be a sideline parent. I felt like I had already spent most of my 20s on the sidelines while really fun things were happening. I didn't want to do that anymore. And so that really catapulted me into this really passionate drive to become educated and then certified and wanting to just spread this joy that I found through this holistic approach and then the accompanying plant-based lifestyle. So that's a bit about me. So now let's get into how a plant-based lifestyle can support you. So here we go. All right, so why is plant-based nutrition gaining so much momentum in the mainstream? It seems like it's everywhere. So the mainstream media is really just catching up to what nutritional scientists have known for decades, that a plant-based diet is the backbone of long-term health. And medical practice in the mainstream knowledge base generally operates 15 years behind research. And that's just how long it takes in the US for research findings to make their way into procedure and practice. So catching up, which is encouraging. But it's not a coincidence that the diet that reverses heart disease is also the diet that reverses diabetes. It's also the diet that reverses or protects our mental health. It's the same diet that leads to not only a longer life, but one with quality, healthy years at the end, so you can enjoy them all. It's just the way the human body loves to be nourished. And so I'm really, really excited by the popularity that it's gaining. But with that comes the fact that plant-based has started to take on many different definitions. So I want to first get on the same page about how I use the term plant-based. And I prefer to use the term whole food plant-based. I shorten it a lot just to plant-based, but because it really focuses on what you do eat rather than what you don't. And it qualifies the types of food consumed by placing whole food at the center, really making health the focus rather than weight or trends or specific diet protocol. And I also prefer it over vegan because it's very easy to be a junk food vegan, someone that doesn't eat meat or animal products, but it doesn't give you any indication of the health of their diet. I could eat Cheetos and Diet Coke all day long and still be vegan. So I'm really more about placing the emphasis on the positive and what you do and how healthy you are rather than what you don't do. So whole food plant-based is generally accepted to mean that 80% or more of your diet consists of whole foods and plant-based foods. So that's because a diet that is 80% or more plant-based is what is shown to have the greatest impact on overall health scientifically. And so that means that the other 20% is really up to you. It could be processed foods. It could include animal products at your discretion. It doesn't have to mean vegan. It can mean whatever you want it to. But it does imply a large plant focus. And that's really the important thing. It's also my preference because it allows for a lot of individuality. We know that not everyone's body responds to food the same way. with a whole food plant-based diet, you have a lot of flexibility to find a balance of foods that work for your body, your gut balance, your energy, and your taste preferences. So it's not a strict list of foods that you can and can't eat, which we know when we do that, when we're super strict, it doesn't work in the long term. And you'll see as we make our way through tonight that I spend all our time talking about what you do eat rather than what you shouldn't. So what are some of the benefits that you can experience with an 80% or more whole food plant-based diet? Well, first, you'll likely experience benefits to your health and energy with any amount of change, really. Plants are just that powerful. But the more you consume, the more benefits you'll experience. And we'll talk about some of those. So the first and most important, I think, is to chronic illness and conditions. So you can reverse heart disease with a whole food plant-based diet. Doctors Dean Ornish, Caldwell Esselstyn, many others now have shown us that this is possible. You can also reverse diabetes. You can improve and prevent Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases. You can put cancer in remission and prevent the growth of new cancer cells. You can control and often cure inflammatory and autoimmune conditions. And actually, autoimmune conditions are wildly responsive to nutritional changes, which also kind of hints that their cause likely has a lifestyle factor base, among many other conditions. So you can also positively impact your mental health, as I've experienced firsthand, which starts with addressing the balance of gut bacteria in order to support neurotransmitter production. And the research is just continuing to show us the importance of the gut-brain axis and its impact on our overall health and wellness. So the gut, more and more that we're learning, is like really at the center of our health. And then there's also just lifestyle sustainability and satisfaction. So a whole food plant-based diet is the one diet that is shown to nutritionally satisfy people, but also mentally satisfy them. And this is due in large part to the fiber content and the fact that followers don't feel the deprivation that strict dieters do. So, when you meet your body's nutritional needs, you experience less cravings. You reset your hunger cues, so you can understand really what your body is telling you. And then there's just an abundance of foods and flavors available to you. And now that the internet has really blown up with plant-based food bloggers, it's become a delicious way to eat. It's not just salads and lentil soup, like it's really delicious. And so the majority of people who go plant-based never go back to their old habits, which is very telling of how wonderful you can feel and how easy it can be. It's never been easier to eat this way than it is now. Another big benefit is the environmental impact, because animal agriculture and animal practices are an immense drain on our planet's resources, not to mention the cause of toxic compounds in our environment. And it's economically very expensive and draining, not only from a resource perspective, but also when it comes to the ties with healthcare, pharmaceuticals, government regulation, insurance, other agencies. The processed and animal food industry is wrapped up in a really tight and complex web of economic and resource draining systems. And so eating plant-based is super beneficial for everyone, whether people follow it or not, and then also for the planet and the future of our planet. All right, so now that we know the benefits, why do our bodies like this so much? And this is the last part of the sciencey stuff that we'll get into. So we're getting to the how very soon. But there are a few key reasons for the power of this diet. And this is in no way an exhaustive list, but some of the key things you need to know. So nutrient density is one. It's a term to keep in the front of your mind when you think about your food. And it refers to the amount of vitamins, minerals, and beneficial compounds, so nutrients, that a food contains in relation to its caloric content. So all plant foods contain a very high ratio of nutrients compared to calories. And the higher the nutritional content and the lower the caloric content in a food, the more beneficial the food is going to be for you. Two of those beneficial compounds are phytonutrients and antioxidants. Phytonutrients are what plants produce in order to protect themselves from disease. And now we know that they have the same protective benefit to us. So this is something that just all plants contain. So the more plants you consume, the more protected you are against disease and pathogens. Now, antioxidants are more well known as the compounds that protect us against inflammation and aging. And aging not just in the sense of like our cells aging and our skin aging and things like that, but also our DNA aging and DNA damage and the toxic compounds that kind of assault our systems. Antioxidants are incredibly protected for that as well, which can come not just from natural aging, but from toxic compounds in our environment and in some of the foods that we eat, especially animal products and the effect that it can have on our DNA. And then fiber is also key to the benefits of plant-based nutrition because it's what helps keep our digestive system in balance, which has a major impact on our immune system. And then it also helps with the feelings of satiety. As you likely know, you're going to feel really full. And then critically, it helps with the efficient transport of nutrients to our cells, which is really what aids every system of our body. It's just allowing our cells to do what they need to do to perform their functions. And if they're not getting the nutrients that they need, then they're not doing what they need to be doing, which is when you start to experience a lot of those negative symptoms. It also aids in blood sugar balance and managing weight because it's very hard to overeat a ton of fibrous foods. If you've ever sat there with either a giant salad or a big bowl of broccoli or something just super high fiber, you may find that like, well, after an entire bowl, you can't eat that much more. You're full. So it's very hard to overeat high fiber foods. Okay. All right, so we talked about the why. Let's get into the how. I saw that a lot of people's goals for tonight are to figure out how to eat this way. So I'd like to spend the majority of our time here. So what does a day of plant-based eating look like? There are 7 main food groups that comprise a plant-based diet, which we'll discuss now with the help of your plant-based guide handout. So it's page 2 of your handout if you have it handy. And then we'll next head over to simple swaps and strategies so that we can kind of bring these foods into your daily life. So here on the left for the visual learners is just I apologize, kind of a crude illustration of what you're aiming for on your plate at each meal. Not every meal is going to look like this. Not every meal is on a plate. So we're not aiming for perfection, but it gives you an idea of your portions. That half of your meal should be your fibrous vegetables and your leafy greens. And then about a quarter of it would be more starchy vegetables or your whole grains. And then another quarter would be your protein source, whether you decide to have plant-based protein or animal protein, and your fat source. Your fat source could be kind of distributed however you want throughout the meal. But those are kind of the portions that you would be aiming for. And then the guidelines that we're going to look at tonight in your plant-based guide are general recommendations. So they're really for a general population, and they can vary based on your health needs and goals, your preferences. If you have food intolerances or sensitivities, obviously you're going to be avoiding some of these foods. And really just how you feel as you begin to include these foods and their quantities in your diet. Your body is really your guide. If you start eating 3 servings of whole grains and you feel like it's just too much, back up to 1 serving, 2 servings. Really let your body guide you. These are guidelines, not rules. And then I also put them in order of importance and impact your health. So if you're looking to start slow, you can prioritize from the top down. So starting with your greens and working your way down. And then you do not need to read everything that's on the slide. If you want to have your handout be your entire screen, that's fine, because I'll be reading what's on the slides to you. So also, let me make my handout a little bigger for myself. Okay, so we're starting with greens because greens are the healthiest food on the planet. It's not an exaggeration. It's the most nutrient-dense food, has the most nutrition per calorie. It provides the strongest protection against chronic disease with a 20% reduction in risk for heart attacks and strokes per daily serving. So if you're going to do anything, eat your greens. Servings of greens per day are about 2 servings, and that would be 1 cup raw and half a cup cooked. These are just some of the sources that you could have for greens, but they were my favorites, so that's what I put. And they're all very high in nutrient density. And some of the ways to get them in my favorite, and I have not found a better way that I love more, is to put them in smoothies. One is because it's super easy. You don't have to stand there and cook. You don't have to think of things to add to the salad. You don't have to put them into any specific recipe. And you can really cover the taste. So if you're not a fan of spinach, if you're not a fan of kale, putting it in a smoothie is one of the best ways to do it because you will not taste it. Put it in with a banana, some fruit, a little non-dairy milk, and you won't even notice it. You can also put both your servings in there. You could put 2 cups of spinach in. You might want to put another half a banana in just to kind of cover the taste. But then you're good to go. Put it in your morning, have it in a morning smoothie, and then you have this energy that can really propel you through the day. So that's one of my biggest recommendations. Also in the recipes that I shared on my website, there is a method in there for making your smoothies ahead of time. So if you think you're crunched for time and you don't want to have to make a fresh smoothie every morning, there is a way to make them ahead of time if you like to meal prep. You can also saute your greens. You can do salads. If you don't get super bored of them, you can do salads. You can also add them to soups. My big thing when it comes to recipes is to not really follow the recipe. And we'll get there with one of my strategies of just how to make it better. But just always be thinking, like, could I add a green here? Could I be adding a vegetable here? So adding them to soups and different recipes like that. Also just having them as a side, having a side of spinach with some strawberry raspberry vinaigrette on it is perfect. All right, now down to our fibrous and root vegetables. So these vegetables, among all of your plant-based foods, are going to decrease inflammation, and they really provide a diverse supply of phytonutrients, antioxidants, vitamins, minerals. They're going to be your best for lowering cancer risk and protecting against heart disease and diabetes. And really, they're awesome for benefiting your gut environment. So getting a variety of these is really important as well. So you're aiming for 3 servings, which would be about half a cup raw. They don't tend to lose a lot of their volume when you cook them down. So that's why it's half a cup raw. Again, these are just some of the sources that you could use. You have broccoli, which is one of the most fibrous. Also another high nutrient density because of its green color. Anything with a really vibrant color is going to be your most nutrient dense. And that's one of the things we'll talk about eating in season as well. Ways to get this in. So fibrous vegetables, any vegetable really, can be really easy as just a side. You can always take out a bag of frozen vegetables and warm it up, add a little seasoning. I love the Mrs. Dash onion and garlic. Put that on it and you have a ready-made side. If that's too boring, there are lots of things you can do. So you can have it raw with dips. There's a wonderful vegan ranch dip that I've shared a few times on Instagram that I could maybe put up onto this page of the website as well for you, which is delicious. Broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, peas, really delicious. And then you could also do stir fries, soups, and stews. I have a chili recipe that's loaded with peppers and some other vegetables that's included in the recipe book. Soups, you can always be adding vegetable to your soup. And then just sauteing and roasting them as a side. I love to do just asparagus in a pan, just stovetop with about 2 to 3 tablespoons of vegetable broth and just kind of sauteing that on the stovetop with some Mrs. Dash onion and garlic. It's delicious. Just kind of another way of like getting different vegetables into your diet. And now fruit. Don't shy away from fruit. Fruit sometimes I feel like gets a bad rap because of its sugar content. But I have to say first that the fructose that is in fruit, no matter what form it's coming in, does not have the same effect as other sugars. And especially if you consume it in its whole food version, straight from the whole fruit, the packaging, the fact that it comes with the fiber and the other nutrients of the fruit diminishes any impact that it would have to your blood sugar, and actually has a really positive impact both to your blood sugar and the way that you process and metabolize it, but also to your satisfaction and fullness from eating it. So fruit is really going to be your powerhouse for anti-inflammatories and antioxidants. It's a potent protector against cancer. It's going to boost your immune system, and it really protects your brain and liver in particular. I listed the fruits here, the raspberries, excuse me. So I listed the berries here: blackberries, blueberries, and raspberries. They're in the order of their level of antioxidants. So blackberries, you're going to have the highest, and then blueberries, and then raspberries, and then strawberries, which aren't on this list, but they're great too. So of the 3 servings, I recommend that at least one of them is berries so that you can get that potent antioxidant protection. Then apples are wonderful, peaches are easy, oranges are easy, bananas fruit is just really easy to get in because there's so many handheld versions that even if you're an on-the-go person, it's super easy to just throw an apple into your purse or to leave a small bag of apples in your car for when you're hungry. Bananas are also great. I know they kind of get a bad rap too, especially after keto kind of called them out, but bananas are great too. Pineapple, mango, especially, those 2 are really great. Grapes, grapefruit, and pomegranate. It's starting to go out of season, but you can still find it. That bright red color is a great indicator of your antioxidant power as well. So if you're looking at the color as your indicator, that's a good one. Fruit, again, is easy. So you can put it in smoothies. You can have it raw with some nut butter. Put it on oatmeal. You can have dried as long as it's no sugar added. Dried fruit. Costco is a great place to get dried fruit. They have tons, and they have a lot of good ones that are no sugar added. You can also put it on top of granola, cereal. Fruit, I feel like, is one of those things that people don't really have a hard time getting in if they are told that they can eat it. So lots of options. All right. Now, whole grains. Okay, so whole grains are wonderful for reducing the risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and stroke. And actually eating whole grains is linked to significant reduction in inflammation. And those who consume whole grains tend to live significantly longer than those who don't. And there are many different reasons for that we won't necessarily get into, but they're mostly linked to the fact that they're very high in fiber. They have a super beneficial impact on your gut and the balance of your gut bacteria, and they're nutrient dense as well. So you're aiming for about 2 to 3 servings, and that would be half a cup cooked or 1 slice of a whole grain bread. One of my favorites and super well known is the Food for Life brand Ezekiel bread. 1 slice of that is a really great source of whole grain. And it's also super easy to eat. So if you don't think you're going to be into eating 2 to 3 servings, having 1 slice of that with some nut butter or some sugar-free jam can be a great option, especially for breakfast. Some of the ways that I like to eat my whole grains, one are just to make them as a side, but instead of using water, I make them with a vegetable broth, which just elevates the flavor a bit and makes it feel kind of like a nicer side. I also add them to soups. I love adding barley to soup. It really thickens any soup that you add it to, so it can make it feel really filling. And especially in the winter, it's got that kind of like stick to your gut feeling, which can be really nice, warming. There are also wild rice cakes, which you can do. You can have those with nut butter. You can do those with jam as well. And then a grain bowl. So this is one of my favorites because it's a very easy thing to make ahead of time or to just kind of assemble as you're trying to figure out what to have for lunch. So you can put a whole grain serving at the bottom of your bowl, and then you just layer it. You can layer with a serving of beans, and you can layer it with whatever vegetables you have on hand. And then I just kind of toss it up with some seasoning. So I see what I have in my cupboard. Some of my favorites are garlic powder. I put that on everything. Sometimes I'll go with a little more of a Mexican flavor, do some cumin and chili powder, kind of just decide what you want your flavor profile to be. And then you can just kind of toss it up with some seasonings. And then there you have a super nutrient dense meal because you have your whole grains. You might have some beans. You could even put some greens in there and kind of make it like a grainy salad. Trying to think what recipe I have. Oh, I have a pancake recipe that's included in the little recipe book that would have a serving of whole grains in there for you. Oatmeal as well is super easy. There's an overnight oats recipe, which is in the recipe handout. That's a super easy one to do. Also because it's very versatile. So you could really add whatever you want to it. You could add a tablespoon of cacao powder to make it more sweet and to have something almost dessert-like. You could add dried fruit. You can add chopped up bananas and berries on top of it. You can really make it kind of suit any taste. Okay, great. And now we have beans and lentils. So beans and lentils are going to be your primary protein source. They also have iron and zinc, fiber, folate, potassium, again, another nutrient-dense food. They're low in saturated fat. They're sodium and cholesterol free. And one or more daily servings is associated with a significant reduction in cancer risk. And again, we keep seeing this over and over, but it's really linked to the fiber and its ability to impact your gut bacteria. So it really, many beans act as a prebiotic, which just means it feeds your good gut bacteria. Where was I? Okay, and so then here's your sources of beans. There are definitely more, but these are some of my favorites and some of the most popular and most versatile. One of my favorite ways to do beans and to get beans in is with black bean burgers. The recipe is in the recipe handout as well. Just because they're so easy and then they're so delicious. And especially if you're looking to transition away from meat products, the texture of this recipe with the black bean burgers, I feel like is probably the best that I have found as far as like a burger replacement. You could also do burritos and tacos are great ways. Lentil soup, lentil burgers, veggie chili. Anytime you see a chili recipe, if it only calls for 1 can of beans, don't listen to it. You can usually do at least 3 cans of beans in any chili recipe. And that really gives you a variety of nutrients and a variety of flavors. And so you can always elevate a chili recipe that way. And then also the super popular kind of trendy option is the Buddha bowl, which has usually a large focus on the beans or lentils and then vegetables. And sometimes people mix like greens and stuff in there as well, but just Googling Buddha bowl formula or Buddha bowl recipe, you'll come up with tons of options for that. So there are many ways to get beans. My one recommendation with beans here is that, because we are recommending 2 to 3 servings, is that if you're coming from a diet that is lower in fiber, you're going to want to work up to your 3 servings of beans. So I would start with 1 serving for a week, and then the next week build up to 2 servings, see how that feels, and then build up to 3. Otherwise, you could experience some digestive discomfort. And also, again, that these servings are just suggestions. You may not eat 2 to 3 servings every day. Maybe one day you have beans and then you're just feeling too full and you don't need any more food that day. That's fine. Just based on our activity, based on what's going on in our lives, based on hormone changes, we just, our appetite can fluctuate every day. So this is really, again, a guide, not a rule for what you need to eat every single day. And then we also have nuts and seeds and fats. So nuts, especially when consumed with other vegetables or with vegetables at that same meal, they increase your body's ability to absorb the nutrients in those plant foods. They also protect brain function and support hormone health because they're providing the healthy fats that we need. And they're also critical providers of minerals that Americans are seriously deficient in. And so we definitely don't get enough of the minerals that we need, especially as far as magnesium, selenium, manganese, copper, iron, we are sometimes deficient in, and zinc. So these are great sources of them, also because such a small serving can provide so much. So we're really just looking for about 1 serving a day of about 1/4 cup. And that's really easy to get in either a handful, just as a snack. Having nut butter, you can put that in smoothies, you can have it with fruit, including a tablespoon of hemp seed, chia seed, flax seed in a smoothie, or sprinkled on top of oatmeal or on top of cereal. Really easy ways to get that in. And sometimes even if you're not a huge nut or seed person, you can even just think of it as your medicine. But like once a day, you gotta have your 1/4 cup, and just find a nut that you like and see if you can stick with it. Because they're gonna fill in a lot of nutritional gaps that many Americans have. And then finally, because I included a recipe for this, you can also use nuts as a base for a lot of sauces. So this is common with cashews, and I created or included in the recipes a cashew Alfredo sauce. So this was one thing that was like totally new to me when I went plant-based, was like this idea of using cashews and different things like this as a base for sauces, because it just never really occurred to me. So you'll see if you start Googling or just kind of following plant-based food bloggers, is that you'll start using ingredients in ways that you maybe hadn't thought of before, which has been really fun for me. So I hope it's fun for you too. And finally, we have spices. So spices, they're not really their own category, but they're worth mentioning because they are potent anti-inflammatories. And again, they contain vital minerals that reduce stroke and heart disease risk. So I'm just encouraging at least 1 serving a day, which really, if you want to enjoy your food and have flavor, you should be getting more than 1 serving a day. Your highest in anti-inflammatories is turmeric. It's getting its moment right now. Everyone knows about it, and it's true. So if you can include that, that would be great. Other ones are ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg, oregano, rosemary, and basil. These are just some of them, but these are the highest in your antioxidants. Some people hide these in their smoothies as well. You can put them on stir fries. You can add cinnamon and nutmeg to your oatmeal, on your veggies, in your grain bowls. I mean, really, the possibilities are endless kind of when it comes to spices, but that's one of the things that I include even a separate section on the pantry stocking list, is to have also a stocked spice rack, because that's really what elevates and brings out the flavor in a lot of these foods. And it brings you a variety of nutrients and minerals. So that's always good too. All right. So now we're going to get into strategies for implementing. And these, if you want to head down to, let's see what page is this. All right, page 6 in your handouts is called Simple Swaps. So these are just my super easy tips, especially if you're new to plant-based eating and looking to make lasting changes. One of the big things, anytime that we're trying to make a lifestyle change, is that we usually try and change too much at once, or we get overwhelmed with the amount of choices. And so these strategies are really designed to start you off slow and to kind of just get you thinking about a different way of eating, so that it just kind of becomes a habit. and we're changing your thinking a little bit here. So how I like to start all the time is just asking, how can I make it better? So when you approach any meal, when you approach a recipe, just pause and ask yourself, how can I make it better? And some of the ways to make it better, first of all, the easiest is just, can you add a vegetable? Could you add a vegetable to the recipe? Could you double the serving that it's asking for? Maybe your chili is only asking you for 1 bell pepper. Could you add 2 bell peppers? Could you have a side salad? Could you microwave a bag of frozen veg? Could you put a vegetable anywhere where there might not be? The answer always is yes. There's always an opportunity to add a vegetable. It may not always be the most interesting option, but there are ways to make it interesting. If you're thinking, oh, I can add a vegetable, but it's not going to be a very good one, or I'm not going to like it, can you add a spice to the vegetable to make it more interesting? Kind of take that, how can I make it better, to the next step. Another way to make anything better is, can you swap out dairy for a non-dairy alternative? And so on the next page down, you don't have to skip there now, but I include all the non-dairy milks and some of their best uses. So there are some that are thicker, there are some that are great for baking, some that aren't, some that are great for cooking and some that aren't. So page 7 will have kind of the breakdown of that for you. Many times you can use an almond or coconut yogurt in place of things. You can usually use maybe kind of a nut-based sauce instead of like a creamy sauce. Then my big one, which we're going to talk about how to do it, but is, can you water saute? Can you remove oil somewhere in the recipe? And I always recommend not heating oil, not cooking with your oil. There's very little purpose to using oil in cooking. And if you can replace it with either just vegetable broth or just simple water, you won't notice it, and you'll really start to bring out the flavors of the food rather than relying on oil, which especially once you heat oil, regardless of smoke point, the minute it starts heating, it is releasing carcinogenic compounds. So you never really want to heat oil. If you want to save your oil for something like a salad dressing or something where you're not heating it, that's up to you. But I would never heat oil. If you have to, I recommend using either an avocado oil or a coconut oil. But more times than not, I would say probably 99% of the time, you can get away with not using oil in a recipe. And we'll talk about how you can water saute in a moment. And then finally, can you swap or remove an animal product for either an alternative or just go without? Now, obviously, there are some recipes where that's not going to work. Where, like, if the meat is like the primary entree, it's not going to work. But in some things like a stir fry, make it a veggie stir fry. If it's a chicken noodle soup, can you just do a noodle soup with a few vegetables? Could you swap the animal product for one of the meat alternatives that are coming out now? Now, I do have a note about meat alternatives in a minute, but for a transition, if you're really struggling with a favorite recipe or just something that you can't let go of yet, consider something like one of those meat alternative products to kind of get you through that transition. And then some of my favorite swaps. So in baking, I use a flaxseed egg. And this is a super easy thing to do, and I actually think it makes my baked goods more moist, is that for 1 egg, you take 1 tablespoon of flaxseed meal, you mix it with 3 tablespoons of room temperature water, and you just let it sit for about 5 minutes, and that will act as your egg. If you need 2 eggs, you would take 2 tablespoons of flaxseed meal with just 5 tablespoons of room temperature water, and then you can keep adding from there. So flaxseed is a powerhouse for lowering blood pressure, cholesterol, and 2 tablespoons a day lowers your risk of diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. One of my favorite plant-based physicians is Dr. Michael Greger, and he actually separates out flaxseed like as its own food category, and that it's like that's one of the areas like you want to eat or consume 2 tablespoons of flaxseed per day, just because of how protective it can be. So if you can put that into your baking, if you can put it into your smoothies, that'll have great benefit for your long-term health. And then water sauteing. So water sauteing is super easy to do. And you can do this with a vegetable broth as well. It doesn't have to be water. But so you heat up your pan, and then you place usually about a 1/4 cup of water in the heated pan. If you're doing something like a whole onion, so it'd be about a 1/4 cup of water. And then you just, kind of saute that around and let it kind of do its thing. If the vegetables begin to stick, you just keep adding 1 to 2 tablespoons of water until you reach the desired texture. And so that's one super easy way to eliminate oil that you don't need. Also, when baking with oil, there are lots of things that you can do instead. So you could be using applesauce and other fruit purees. You just use half of the amount called for. So if it's calling for half a cup of oil, you just use a 1/4 cup of applesauce. Applesauce can make it sometimes a little bit more dense of a cake. So sometimes it's nice to use either a banana puree, or wasn't mango. It'll come to me. I'll share it. If you really need to use the oil, I would recommend coconut oil. And again, you would just substitute that as a 1-to-1 ratio. Sweeteners. So if you can eliminate refined sugars from your baking, that would be great. You can usually use half the amount of these sweeteners that it calls for. So you can use maple syrup. You can use a 1/4 of the amount of honey, because honey is so dense and usually pretty sweet. You can also use dates or date paste. You can make a date syrup out of it just by taking 3 dates and about a 1/4 cup of water and soaking them, and then putting them in a blender and just whipping them up kind of into a syrup. That's probably one of my favorites because I feel like it gives the sweetest taste without being overwhelming. And you don't get much of like a datey type flavor at all. It's really just kind of a sweetness. So that's really nice. Okay. So now we'll head back to our PowerPoint. So my next strategy is to add before you subtract. And so while what is consumed on a standard American diet, it holds really a large part of the blame for our chronic health crisis, what we're not eating also has a really heavy hand in how we're feeling. So before you go eliminating like all your favorite foods, start by adding in the protective and fibrous foods. And then they'll just make crowding out those higher fat or processed foods easier. Because between the fiber content, the nutritional satisfaction that your body will feel, you'll just start naturally pushing more processed foods aside in favor of those foods that satisfy you. Because honestly, there just simply won't be as much room for the junk food at the end of the day. And you start kind of resetting some of your body's systems that those higher fat or processed foods just aren't as attractive when you start adding in kind of more of these protected foods. And then finally, it's just focusing on adding instead of subtracting is just a more enjoyable way to eat, is to think about what can I eat and what am I eating today? And instead of thinking, well, I'm not eating those chips today and I'm not eating that candy today, just thinking, I'm going to have my greens this morning. I'm putting them in my smoothie, and then you can let it go. And then also eating in season. So you have a handout for this as well. One of the reasons for doing this, major reason, is it allows for a variety of nutrients over the course of the year. So variety is the spice of life. It's a variety of nutrients is really beneficial. But you don't have to break your back to have a variety of foods every single day. One of the easiest ways is just to eat in season And then you know over the course of the month, over the course of the year, that you're getting a variety of nutrients. I'm very much a creature of habit. I pretty much eat the same thing every day, but every month or so, I mix it up, just so I get a variety of that protection and different nutrients throughout the year. It's also the time when you'll get the foods at their highest nutritional peak. So you're getting the most benefit from them. They're not traveling as far. They're not being refrigerated as long to get to you. And they're picked at the peak of ripeness. So you're really getting the most benefit from them if they're in season. And finally, it's cheaper. When you're eating in season, the supply is high. So you're spending less. And you'll notice that as you walk around the store, that at certain times of the year, oh, apples are super cheap. Where we live, apples are pretty much in season all the time, but you can see this with berries, different melons and things like that, that they'll be cheaper at certain times of the year. So if you want to, you can use that as your cheat, that like, well, I'll buy the cheap produce when I'm walking around. And then also it's important to read the ingredients label. So when you pick up a packaged food, don't even look at the front of it. Go immediately to the ingredients label. Skip over the nutrition facts because most of the time that's not giving you the whole picture anyway. And so look at the ingredients label and look for things you recognize. Look for a list that is no more than 10 ingredients. Ideally, it would be less than 5. And are the ingredients things that you would have in your cabinet? Could you replicate this and make it at home? Is it something that is just a convenient food, but you recognize everything that's in it? And if you wanted to, you could make it at home. It's kind of a silly thing, and it's probably something that sounds really common sense. But if you're looking at it and it looks more like a list of chemicals and things that you don't understand, that's your body's not going to understand it either and not going to know what to do with it. Okay. And then also just as a way to help yourself as you progress on this journey is to compile a list of go-to meals and recipes. You try them, you like them, they might be convenience foods that you've tried and at least done the research on, but they're just easy meals that you don't have to look up a recipe. You already know you like it, and just post it on your fridge for that day that you come home. You don't want to think about what you're making for dinner, but you know, oh, I can make that burrito recipe super quickly. I can make that grain bowl in 5 minutes. Just to kind of help yourself along, because we don't need to struggle to eat well. And so just little things like making it easy with like a go-to meals list. It's just another way to support yourself and kind of make this process easier. And in that mini recipe book on my website, there's 7 recipes in there that are my favorites. So check those out. Maybe you could add them to your go-to meals list as well. And then finally, stock your pantry with some staples. So there's nothing more frustrating than going to make that recipe you just found online and not having the ingredients you need. So take a look at the pantry staples list in your handouts because they include the ingredients that are incredibly common on plant-based food blogs, on vegan recipes, just to help kind of round out your cupboards so that when you're going to make these recipes, you have what you need. One note, so I said I wanted to talk about meat alternative products. They are everywhere now. I'm of a split mind about it. So I'll just say that while these substitutes are an option while you're transitioning to a more plant-based diet, they're still a highly processed food with a very low nutrient density. So, and they're also a new category really to our food system. So we don't yet know what impact they'll have on our long-term health. We just know that based on some of the ingredients, they're not a health food. And they should be treated just like any other processed food as something that you have in moderation and don't rely on it as part of a healthy diet. It's kind of one of those things that can just kind of help you get to the next step. All right. So let me pause again here, Sarah, and see if there are any questions that we want to get to before we get to the end.
Yes, we've had a few good ones. I have to scroll back up. I think you did answer one of them. Bear with me. Oh, okay. So first question was from Kristen. She says, I have heard conflicting information regarding soy and cancer. Can you weigh in?
Yes, I can. So I won't go into the whole story just for time's sake, but that belief stems from the misunderstanding previously that phytoestrogens, which is what soy contains, act the same as estrogen. And in fact, it doesn't. So we thought that by consuming soy, we were upping our estrogen levels. And that when we get to a level of having too high of estrogen in your body, it throws everything off. And so a lot of things can happen. One of them is a development of cancer. We now know, due to research from the last 10 to 15 years, that phytoestrogens do not act the same way as estrogens. Actually, their name is a misnomer. They don't act the same way. They don't have the same effect on our body. And actually, they can have a beneficial effect on our body, actually helping to decrease the estrogen levels in some people and the cancer risk in many people. So there is a small subpopulation of men that if they have a prostate risk, they might want to watch just how much soy they have, but it's a very small percentage of the population. And the level of soy that they would have to eat in order to be at high risk is probably higher than most people would be eating anyways. So there's no real concern for eating soy, like for anybody.
All right, that's good. Also, Nancy, similar kind of question. Consumer Reports tested commercial spinach and kale and found high amounts of pesticides and some bacteria. Are you creating another risk by eating lots of store-bought greens in your smoothies?
So if you were to take them straight out of the bag, potentially. That's why it's always a good idea. One, if you can buy organic, to buy organic. Kale and spinach is always on the Dirty Dozen from the Environmental Working Group as high in pesticides. So you want to be rinsing them and washing them really well before you use them. Also, if you can buy the not bagged varieties are always going to be your better bet as well. So if you can buy the ones that like, they're usually just wrapped up with like a little twist tie. So like they look like just, you know, free sitting leaves on the shelf. If you can buy those, that's better than buying like the pre-bagged Fresh Express or whatever they are. If you can do that, that's the best. But rinsing will get rid of about 95% of pesticides on leaves. Kale, you do need to work it a little bit as you're rinsing. Don't just kind of run it under the water because it has all those little kind of fibrous areas where contaminants can stick in. So you just have to be really good about washing your greens. But beyond that, I'm not concerned about the level of pesticides that would still remain on there because the protective qualities that they have are going to outweigh the small amount of pesticide that would be left. But if you can buy organic, that's probably the best way to go.
All right, we do have a couple more. Would you please speak about powdered collagen peptides as part of a plant-based diet, especially as it may affect those of us over 50?
So I'm sorry that my knowledge of the collagen is not that extensive, that I don't want to comment. I don't want to comment on it with the amount of knowledge that I have. I feel I would need to do a little bit more research before I could say.
Okay, I think, oh, and you sort of addressed this, but Emily asks, do you find a plant-based diet is more expensive than a meat and dairy diet?
No, so we actually, my family transitioned from a very heavy meat diet to a plant-based diet, added 2 kids to it, and our budget is still $200 less per month probably than it used to be. It really depends on how you shop and how you eat. If you're looking at meat alternative products and you're buying things like a lot of like the frozen things, frozen sausages, not turkey burgers, like soy burgers and like things like that, it could be more expensive. But if you're really looking at whole foods, it's cheaper because to buy bulk grains is super cheap, especially if you look in the international food sections. They're generally cheaper than some of the other aisles. Produce is usually, we just shop kind of the expensive way and go once a week and make sure we're not throwing food out every few days. I haven't found that it's more expensive. I think it just depends on the foods that you're buying. Beans are generally very inexpensive. Even nuts and seeds are probably our most expensive, but because we only consume probably a quarter cup a day. And sometimes with hemp seeds, flax seeds, the serving size is just 1 tablespoon, that can last us a long time. So I really don't find that it's more expensive. I think it really just depends on the types of foods that you're choosing to buy. And if you stick to the whole foods, it would be cheaper.
All right. And they're still coming in. I don't know if you wanted to address them all right now.
Oh, well, I can finish up. I just have 1 more or 2 more slides.
Okay. I'll just do that, and then we'll start with these at the end.
Okay. That sounds good.
And feel free to add more.
Okay. So now just kind of bringing it all together. So anytime we want to make a change, it's going to take a little bit of preparation and planning and just kind of thinking through how these changes are going to work in your daily life. So kind of put on your own holistic health hat and think about the areas of your life where you can make changes to support your goals. Like, where might there be obstacles? Where can you find support? What new habits may help make lifestyle change easier for you? And then you can kind of begin to develop habits around some of these practices. And then they just eventually become the way you live. And you're just then a whole food, plant-based eater. And so if it means a little bit of work up front, know that it will quickly become second nature. And that's why it is okay to start small. It's also okay to not like something or to have something that just doesn't work for you. Be ready to adjust. Be ready to try new things and then to try again. And just because you don't like one food or one aspect of a lifestyle doesn't mean that it's not for you. It just means that you need to find what does work for you. So be patient. And also, I say this with a little bit of caution. Let Google and the library be your friend to some extent. Google plant-based recipes. Look for vegan cookbooks. I've been going to the library a lot lately to pick up books for vegan Instant Pot recipes because we just got an Instant Pot. There are tons and tons and tons of vegan and plant-based cookbooks coming out and that are already out. So they're a great way to just see kind of what other people are doing and to get some ideas and to see how you can start putting this together. And then again, you can Google plant-based mac and cheese. Take some of the recipes that you already love, the foods you already love, and just Google to see if there's a vegan version. There's pretty much now a vegan version for everything. I make vegan bacon. It's made out of tempeh. It's not perfect, but it does the trick for certain recipes. There's just a vegan version for everything. So sometimes if you use the term vegan, you're more likely to get more hits and to see what people are doing. Rather than using the plant-based term, because plant-based still can include, some people still include some dairy in those recipes and things like that. So you could just kind of have to tease out what you want to do, but use the tools at your disposal. And then, as I said, I've created a few resources for you that are available on my website so that you can begin planning and exploring what methods will work for you. And what you need to be successful. So they are goal setting sheets and also just planning sheets. So thinking through what's going to work for your lifestyle. And kind of just remember that there's a method, there's a food, there's an exercise for everyone. So if at first you don't like it, keep trying. Go into the process with curiosity, creativity, an open mind. And I guarantee you're going to find something that you like and something that sticks. And then on my own website, I do have a list of resources that I have vetted both for financial interests and third-party interests. So that's at emholisticwellness.com/trusted-resources. And those all gear more toward the scientific literature. So it's really just if you want to know more about the why of a lot of things. And then, as I said, the handouts, worksheets, recipes, and slides are all available at emholisticwellness.com/PRPL. So those are resources designed just for you that you will have access to. And then there's just my contact information. All right. So what other questions do we have, Sarah? I know we're kind of over on our time.
Well, first I want to say thank you, Emma. That was very informative.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent information. We do have a few more, and feel free to add them as we go. Lauren wondered if there's anything you crave or miss after transitioning to this type of eating.
So normally I say no. Right now I am pregnant, so I miss cheese a lot. But there are tons of ways that I'm satisfying that with different recipes that I have up my sleeve. But I would say no, that's the only thing really that I've missed. Yeah, even like my sweet tooth, I'm able to satisfy that with different things. Like those plant-based burgers really do it for me when I want a burger. You know, I've never enjoyed eating as much as I do now. So just the flavors that are available, you know, your taste buds really change too as you progress towards a more whole food plant-based diet, because your body's not relying on, you know, just that oil and sugar to kind of up your palate. So it's really probably the most satisfying way of eating that I've ever done. And I've done a lot of diets, a lot of different protocols. So this is the most satisfied I've ever been.
That's fascinating. I can't imagine doing without cheese. Jill wondered, and I apologize, I don't think I'll pronounce this correctly. Have you used Yakan syrup as a sweetener? What ratio would you use to substitute?
Oh, I have not used that personally. I imagine that it would be similar to the other syrups like agave and date syrup, which I would say would probably be like a quarter of what's called for in the recipe. But that might be something I would Google just because I haven't done it myself. Sorry.
All right, and then another one on the cravings question, I guess. Any tips for transitioning picky kid eaters to plant-based, in particular cheese substitutes?
I have one of those. I'm working on her right now, trying to get her off things. So this is where I did use for a while the like vegan cheeses. And there's one in particular that I love and my daughter loves. It's called Chow. And they don't even call it cheese. Like it's really just kind of a product of its own, but it is creamier than any real cheese I've ever had. It's available at Target, Whole Foods, and some Jewels, not all of them. But it's in a slice. It's like it looks like an American cheese type thing, but it's white. And so that's where I was using a lot of like, just like vegan substitute type things to get my kids off of it, or my 3-year-old off of it. We also use Daiya cheese on a lot of different things. That's like a shredded cheese that melts a little nicer than other vegan cheeses. What else I've done for her. I make a vegan mac and cheese, which has the base, it's a cashew and potato sauce. It's a very common recipe, so I think if you just Google for it, you can find it. But it's a mix of cashews, a little garlic powder, white potatoes, and some nutritional yeast. There might be a couple other things in there. But I use that for mac and cheese to kind of get her away from like the box mac and cheese. Those are my big ones, but I'm still kind of struggling with the toddler part because I have one toddler she's basically eaten this way since she could eat. So she's totally fine with it. She loves beans. She loves lentils. She's a pretty adventurous and great eater. And then my 3-year-old is just she's picky to begin with, and then picky if she sees something she doesn't recognize. So if anyone has tips, I would love them, and I will share them as I find them too.
Oh, I sympathize with that too. Okay, a lot of people saying thank you. This was wonderfully informative.
Okay.
Also, someone wondering about if you know, or did you talk about jackfruit, and what is there to know about it?
I didn't, but I can. So this is usually, it's kind of difficult to find in its natural state, I guess. You can find it canned at Trader Joe's, and you can usually find it in the vegan food section packaged at other stores. It's kind of like a, I would say it's almost like a shredded pork or shredded chicken texture. That's at least usually what how it's used in recipes, is for like a pulled pork sandwich or something. It's an Asian fruit. It's huge. If you go to like an Asian market, it's this huge fruit that you probably wouldn't want to buy that way. You probably want to buy it in the can or buy it kind of pre-mixed, just for convenience, I think. But it takes on the flavors really well of whatever it's being cooked with. It can be used, you know, for sandwiches. I've seen it in like a teriyaki type recipe. Again, it's just another, it's a nutrient dense. It's a pretty good source of vitamins for us. It's, I'm trying to think, because I don't eat it very often, and I actually don't talk about it very often, so I'm surprised to have the question, but I think it's a pretty good source of protein as well. And also just works really well texture-wise for something if you're looking for like a pork. But it is in like smaller, the way that like meat kind of comes out of it is like in smaller chunks. So it kind of works well. It's like a pulled pork type thing. I don't know if that really answered exactly what you wanted, but that's what I know about jackfruit.
You say you don't know a lot, but it sounds like you do. One last question I'm seeing. Just wondering why cabbage wasn't in the fibrous vegetable list.
Just oversight. I was listing some of my favorites and trying to go down the list of the most nutrient dense. Red cabbage is excellent and super nutrient dense and a really great thing to include in your day. So just honestly a space issue of why it wasn't listed. A limitation of the design platform I was using. It's great. It's great to have on top of your salads. I love to have it with kale in a kale salad. Very nutrient dense. That purple color is really great and has compounds and nutrients in it that you don't find in a lot of other fruits and vegetables just because of that purple color. So yes, thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, a whole lot of gratitude. And I will extend that again. Thank you so much, Emma, for this excellent presentation, for joining us, sharing your expertise. And about 50 of you for joining us, which is super impressive. So thank you so much. But you know, it's almost 8:30, so I'm sure we all want to go and explore recipes and start thinking about this. And let's see. Oh, I want to add my email address because I know that some of you missed the handout. So feel free to email me at sveselo@prpl.org, or of course, reach out to Emma. She's got her contact information up here. And oh, Kathy's mentioning give out the handout email again. Well, Amy Bartucci put together an excellent Google Drive link. So that's another way to access the handout, but I'm also happy to email it again. So don't go without the handout.
I also have them posted on that link here on the right on the PowerPoint as well. I included them there. Just in case.
Okay. Well, thanks again, everyone.
Thank you. It was so much fun. Thank you for having me.